Rain lashed against the shimmering glass of Court Spire 13, a jagged tower that pierced the black clouds like a blade. The city of Ventra Prime hung in midair, suspended by unseen gravity spires, glimmering above the storms that never ceased. Here, justice was not blind. It was bought. Naila stood before the tribunal, wrists bound by dull magnetic cuffs, her olive-toned skin bruised from the guard's handling. Her silver hair, tied in a rough knot, clung to her damp cheeks. She was not a criminal, but that didn't matter. "You stand accused," High Arbiter Jasek intoned, his voice smooth as silk and cold as ice, of poisoning Lord Salvan, resulting in his untimely demise. "How do you plead?" "Not guilty," Naila said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremble in her legs. "I gave him herbs to ease his fever. Nothing more." "Liar," someone spat from the shadows. "A woman. One of Salvan's courtiers. Paid to speak." Roneth sat in the viewing gallery, fists clenched in his lap. Only 17, but his eyes were sharp. Too sharp. He watched as false evidence was paraded out. Vials that had never passed through his mother's hands. Scrolls claiming prior attempts. All fiction. "This is wrong," he whispered. Beside him, Talene, the quiet neighbor from their sector block, touched his shoulder. "Be still, child. They've decided the outcome before the trial began." And she was right. When the verdict was spoken, Naila did not cry. She only looked up at the boy who was her son, her eyes saying the words she could not live. Roneth watched as they dragged her away. And he decided then and there, he would not let the truth rot in silence. Not for his mother. Not ever. He spent the next hours wandering the rain-slick streets of Lower Ventra, his mind a blur. Voices whispered in alleys, lights shimmered in neon reds and blues, but none of it registered. He made it back to their sector housing in a daze. Their small apartment was too quiet. Too empty. The silence pressed down on him like water. On the table sat the pouch. The one his mother always kept with her. A collection of healing herbs wrapped in worn velvet, embroidered with a faded sun symbol. He sat cross-legged on the floor and slowly opened it. Inside, fever root. Blossom vine. Ice thistle. Known across the sectors. All harmless, used in hundreds of curatives. But then, he noticed something strange. One of the ice thistle leaves shimmered faintly blue in the low light. He held it closer. Sniffed it. There was a chemical undertone beneath the herbal scent. Something synthetic. His heart thudded. This wasn't hers. Someone had tampered with her pouch. Someone had planted poison after she delivered the medicine. It was enough. Enough to start. Roneth knew he needed access to a truth lab. The advanced forensic centers were the only places that could validate his findings. But they were locked behind privilege, available only to guilds, nobility, and court scientists. So he did the unthinkable. He forged a pass. It took him 3 days of asking favors, of lurking in old data dens and listening to whispers. On the 4th day, he stood in line outside the Sliver Bar, an underground place known for its secrecy and its connections. Inside, light pulsed dimly through coils of mist. Digital ivy climbed the walls. Patrons wore masks, some for fashion, some for fear. He approached the bar and whispered, "I need to speak with Kren." The bartender didn't blink. Just nodded to the back room. Kren was a short man with silver implants along his jaw and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You've got coin, kid." "No," Roneth said. "But I have purpose." "Oh, wonderful. One of those." Roneth laid out the herb sample. "I need it tested." Discreetly. Kren studied it. Then studied him. "You're Naila's boy." Roneth didn't flinch. "Yes. And she didn't poison anyone." Kren raised a brow. "Dangerous claim." Truth shouldn't be dangerous. That's where you're wrong, kid. But all right. I'll run it. Come back tomorrow. That night, Ronath couldn't sleep. He paced the apartment like a caged animal. Memories came in flashes, Naila reading to him by lantern light, laughing in the herb fields outside the city, pressing a warm hand to his fevered head when he was 10. He clenched his fists. He would not lose her to lies. When he returned to the bar the next day, Kren was waiting with a datapad. Your leaf, Kren said, tapping the screen, was coated in a derivative of Nissic toxin. Rare. Expensive. Banned from trade. Only found in noble houses. Ronath felt cold all over. They framed her. Looks that way. Someone wanted Lord Salvin dead, and your mom took the fall. Can I have a copy of the report? Already sent it to your cloud code. But listen, don't go waving this around. You're dancing on a razor's edge. I'm not stopping until she's free. Kren sighed. Then you're gonna need allies. And a new name. By nightfall, Ronath had disappeared. In his place, a new persona began to surface. A shadow in the cracks of Ventra Prime. Not Ronath, the herbalist's son. But Kale. And Kale would not rest until the truth burned through the lies like fire. The shuttle that carried Naila to Terek wasn't made for comfort. Its rusting hull groaned with every shift of gravity, and the seats were bare metal, stained from years of exile transports. She sat shackled between two strangers, neither of whom spoke. Silence was law on this route, words had a way of turning into memories, and memories were dangerous. Out the tiny porthole, the stars disappeared behind the blur of the moon. Terek was no paradise. It was the graveyard of the unwanted, where wind carved valleys of ice through desolate stone and the sun never fully rose. When the shuttle landed, Naila was shoved into a line with the others. They were processed without names, just numbers, and handed ragged thermal suits, little more than stitched-together scraps. She stepped into the cold like one stepping off a cliff. The exile colony was a cluster of angular buildings half buried in snow. Lights flickered weakly from under thick frost. Guards watched from steel towers, not to protect them, but to make sure they didn't escape. Naila was assigned to Bunk 6, a low structure with only a thermal vent keeping it from becoming a tomb. Inside, 10 other exiles huddled in silence, some already asleep, others staring at the walls. Name, one asked. Naila. We don't use real names here, a voice muttered from the shadows. A man stepped forward. His face was lined with age, half covered by a burned scar. But you can keep yours if you're stubborn. I'm not ashamed of it, she replied. He grunted. Karen. She nodded. Why are you here? I spoke the truth. Me too. He smiled for the first time, and it was a sad, tired thing. Then you're in the right place. The days blurred together. The cold never left. Food was rationed in gray cubes. Many exiles fell into silence, or madness. Naila did not. She started healing again. She found scraps of moss in cracks near the thermal vents. She made tinctures from lichen. She stitched wounds with thread torn from her own clothing. Soon, the others came to her with coughs, frostbite, bruises. She never asked names. She just helped. You shouldn't draw attention, Karen warned. They don't like anything that gives us hope. I'm not doing it for them. One night, during a supply sweep of the old sector, a part of the colony abandoned after a methane leak, Naila found something strange. Beneath a rusted storage unit, she pried open a frozen hatch. Inside was a storage cache long forgotten, old medical supplies, sealed vials, worn datapads. Most were dead. But one pad still glowed. She wiped off the dust and powered it on. The screen flickered to life with a security key. She hesitated, then entered the only code she remembered, her court case number. It opened. The pad wasn't just medical. It was a logbook. And inside were notes from someone named Iran's, notes detailing the shipment of Nisic toxin. Cargo rerouted to house Salvan under Directive J-7, requested by Arbiter Jasic. Naila's breath caught. Jasic. Her judge. He'd ordered the poison. She took the pad back to her bunk, wrapped in cloth. Her hands shook. You found something, Karen said. Not a question. Proof. A logbook that connects my judge to the poison. Karen looked at her for a long moment. You can't keep it here. The guards sweep weekly. Give it to Irinzel. She keeps things safe. Who? You'll know her when you hear her. Irinzel was blind. She lived in the far end of the colony, in a tent made from sailcloth. Her eyes were clouded with mist, but she moved like she could see everything anyway. Naila offered her the pad. They'll destroy it if they find it. Irinzel nodded. Then I'll bury it where no eyes go but mine. Why help me? Because once, I had a daughter. And they lied to her too. Weeks passed. Naila grew stronger, despite the cold. People began to look at her differently, not as a criminal, but as a source of calm. One day, she found herself standing alone beneath the polar arch, a frozen bridge carved by wind over centuries. She didn't cry. She whispered to the stars, Roneth, stay alive. Far above, in Ventra Prime, her son was doing just that. And he was becoming something new. The alleys of Ventra Prime were carved from metal and shadow. High above, the court spires glinted like knives in the stormlight, but down below, the city had a heartbeat of its own, slow, irregular, and dangerous. Here, Kale made his home. Once Roneth, the son of a condemned healer. Now, a shadow learning how to fight in silence. He had taken a job under a false name in the vast archives buried beneath the capital. The Ventran archive complex was a labyrinth of data vaults, echoing stone halls, and memory slabs. Few people ventured into the lower levels, and those who did often kept to themselves. Kale worked the night shifts. Less attention, fewer questions. He sorted digitals, cleaned broken readers, catalogued history. And, more importantly, he listened. The one who helped him most wasn't a historian, but a slicer. Tylo, short for Tylos Ven, but he hated the full name, was all sharp smiles and restless fingers. He wore a striped coat 3 sizes too big and talked like every word might be his last. You're not really here for history, are you? Tylo asked one night, after catching Kale digging through old court records. You've got a look. Like someone with ghosts. Kale didn't answer. Not directly. My mother was condemned on a lie. That was enough. The two of them began to work together. Tylo could crack into encrypted files with a few strokes. Kale provided the motive, the trail, the fury. Together, they started with court logs. Then pharmacy registries. Then noble contracts. And what they found chilled them both. Arbiter Jasic's signature appeared on over 24 hush contracts. Settlements made in secret. Records erased. Names deleted. And always, the contracts centered on rare herbs. Healing patents. Chemical formulations. They're consolidating the entire trade, Kale said. Whoever controls medicine, controls survival. And your mom, Tylo asked. Was in the way. Kale started broadcasting pieces of the truth anonymously. Using stolen access codes, he uploaded snippets to the local data net. Not enough to be caught, just enough to stir questions. People began to whisper. To doubt. That was when the threats began. Encrypted messages sent to their private terminals. Stop, or we stop you. Tylo laughed it off. They don't know who we are. And if they did, well, they'd have to catch us first. Kale didn't laugh. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because fear had stopped mattering. One night, they followed a lead to an old Skywatch station, long since decommissioned. It held backup servers that hadn't been purged in years. There, Cale found the missing transcript from Naila's trial. The original recording. Unedited. In it, the testimonies conflicted with the court summary. A witness who'd claimed she'd seen Naila mix poison, had, in the real footage, said the opposite. It had been doctored. He downloaded the footage. Backed it up twice. But by the time he returned to the city, he noticed someone was watching. Not just the guards. Not just drones. Someone else. Someone who knew his face. Cale disappeared for a week. Went dark. Tylo covered for him at the archives. When he returned, he looked thinner. Harder. But alive. And he had a plan. We leak it all, he told Tylo. Every contract. Every erased record. Her trial footage. We send it over the Skycast channels. Not just to the capital. To every outpost. That'll get us killed. Probably. So why do it? Because they already killed her name. I'm just giving them a fair trade. They set the date. 3 days from now. The Festival of Veils, a holiday of masks and shadows. The perfect cover. They hijacked a transmission node in the Skyport tower. It was risky. Exposed. But the signal range was wide enough to hit 10 colonies at once. As they made final preparations, Tylo looked at Cale and asked, "What happens after?" Cale looked out at the spires. Either they silence us. Or they can't anymore. In the last hour before the broadcast, Cale did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a message to his mother. He didn't send it, there was no line to Tarek. But he wrote it anyway. "Mother, I know you didn't do it. I'm proving it. And whether or not I survive, they will know your name again. They will remember." At midnight, the first packet went live. Court records. Chemical signatures. Voice transcripts. Then. The unedited trial footage. It spread like fire. Across terminals. Across sectors. And the city of Ventra Prime held its breath. The moon Tarek did not burn. It froze, starved, endured. But the day Naila stepped into the old ice quarry, now a ruin of broken stone and secrets, it might as well have caught fire. It had started as a rumor. A mad whisper passed among exiles. Beneath the quarry was something left behind before the exile camps, an old outpost, maybe a medical site from the war era. Karen went with her. He'd been watching her grow more restless, more determined. "If what you find helps destroy what put us here," he said, "then I'll dig with you until my fingers bleed." And they did. They found rusted doors frozen shut. Old rails. Ancient consoles under layers of frost and collapsed stone. It took them 4 nights. On the 5th, Naila uncovered the vault. Inside, samples. A cure, half formulated, half forgotten. A prototype that, if refined, could destabilize the entire noble stranglehold on healing agents. This was never about a single murder, Karen muttered. They erased people to protect profits. Naila nodded. "I need to get this off-world." It was impossible, of course. No transports left Tarek, not without clearance. But Irinzal, blind, patient, always listening, had been preparing for something like this. "I know a way," she said. "There's a smuggler's ship that flies low supply runs. They don't land, but they have a winch. One of the guards owes me a favor. He doesn't know it yet, but he'll cash it." Naila clutched the vials to her chest. "I can't let this vanish. They'll kill to bury it. Then don't let them catch you." The plan came together like frost forming on glass, slow, dangerous, beautiful. Karen would create a diversion at the guard station. Irinzel would guide Naila through the canyon paths, avoiding the patrols. The ship would pass at night, exactly once. And then Naila would be gone. On the night of the escape, Karen limped to the comms relay. He wore an old guard uniform stolen from storage and looped a recorded alert through the system. Methane breach in Sector 12. Immediate evac protocol. Alarms wailed. Lights flickered. Guards scrambled. In the confusion, Naila and Irinzel slipped into the canyons. At the final ridge, Irinzel turned to her. "I won't go with you. But you. I belong here. This is my penance. Go. Make it matter." Naila embraced her. A quiet, trembling goodbye. Then she climbed. The ship was a silhouette against the stars, just a blur of red lights and humming metal. A cable dropped. She latched on. As the winch lifted her, gunfire cracked below. Karen had been spotted. He ran. Drew them away. He never made it out. Naila didn't cry. She clutched the vial and the data pad as the ship pulled her from the ice. She was no longer an exile. She was a spark. Back on Ventra Prime, the city was reeling. The footage Kale had leaked had ignited unrest across the colonies. Riots flared. Petitions swarmed the council halls. Banners with Naila's name hung from balconies. In the shadows, Kale and Tylo moved between safe houses. "She's alive," Kale whispered one night, though he had no proof. He could feel it. "And she's coming." Naila landed in the northern fringe of the capital, in a farming district that hadn't seen a starship in a decade. She was unrecognizable, hooded, frostbitten, eyes like molten ice. She walked for 2 days, avoiding checkpoints. On the third morning, she reached a safe house marked with the symbol of a crushed flower. The door opened. Kale stared at her. No words came. Then, "Mother?" Naila stepped inside. "You did it." And for a moment, the war paused. They had one chance. The Noble Council was scrambling, desperate to repair the damage. They planned to hold a broadcast, one last public statement to control the narrative. Kale had a better idea. "We interrupt them," he said. "We override their feed. We show your cure. We show it working." "On who?" Tylo asked. "On a noble child," Naila said. "They'll never agree." "They will," Kale said, "if the child's dying." The child's name was Lyran, a 10-year-old with a terminal lung condition. His father was a council member. And he had come to Kale in secret, desperate, begging. "We'll save him," Naila said. But only on camera. It was a cruel trade. But necessary. And when the day came, as the council began their lies, the broadcast shattered. On every screen, a boy gasping, then breathing. Healing. And behind him, Naila. Alive. Vindicated. It began with a silence deeper than any riot. The kind of silence that precedes a scream, the moment when the city holds its breath. Then, across the highest tower of Ventra Prime, the Skycast feed cracked with static. The council's official address faded. In its place, Naila's face. Calm. Clear. Defiant. "I was condemned for a crime I did not commit. They exiled me. Buried me. Tried to erase me. But the truth does not stay buried forever. Today, I stand with proof, with a cure, and with justice." Behind her, the boy Lyran coughed, then breathed, steady and strong. "This child is healed," she said. "Not by their patents. Not by their greed. But by what they tried to silence." Chaos erupted. In the streets below, people poured from their homes. The city convulsed with movement. Protesters flooded the courts. Banners unfurled with Naila's name. "Bring the arbiter forward," someone shouted. "Where is Jacek?" Riot suppression drones fired warning shots. They were met with stones. Inside the safe house, Kale and Tylo prepared for the final strike. "They'll come for us now," Tylo said, checking a pulse pistol. "Let them," Kale said. "We're done hiding." Naila placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "If we fall, make it count." "We won't fall," Kale said. "Not today." The council chambers were fortified, but not impregnable. Kale led the surge. Aided by defecting guards, workers, even old court scribes, those who had once been too afraid to speak, now marched with him. Naila walked at the center, cloak billowing, face bare. In the grand plaza of the court spire, they confronted Jacek. He stood at the dais, surrounded by elites, voice trembling behind false calm. "This is madness," he began. "Unauthorized sedition." Naila stepped forward. "Your lies are over." Kale threw a hollow slab at his feet. It flickered to life, showing the erased trial footage. The doctored evidence. The hush contracts. "Do you deny this?" Kale asked. Jacek was silent. "Then we don't need your answer." People surged forward. But Naila raised a hand. "No, let him stand trial, an honest one. Let him feel what it means to be judged by truth." Kale looked at her, and for the first time since she was taken, saw peace behind her fire. By nightfall, the court spire burned. Not from vengeance, but from revelation. The old records were released. The noble monopolies shattered. Naila's cure spread across colonies. Rebel doctors distributed copies. The healing trade was broken open. Jacek was detained under guard. His name stripped from the tribunal ledgers. A new council was formed. One not ruled by profit, but memory. Naila and Kale didn't stay. They walked the streets the next morning, quiet amid the ash and sun. Tylo joined them, fingers bandaged, smile crooked. "You two are legends now," he said. "No," Naila said. "We're survivors." Weeks later, a small garden bloomed where the court spire once stood. Wild herbs. Nothing patented. Just healing, growing freely. Kale and Tylo sat together under its shade, fingers entwined, eyes on a future that once seemed impossible. Naila tended the plants, silent. And the wind, for once, carried no judgment. Only peace. Spring came slowly to Ventra Prime. The rain softened. The air warmed. And though the court spire had fallen, its ashes nourished something new. Naila spent her mornings tending the healing garden. Children visited daily, asking about herbs, about stories. Some asked if she was the one who healed the noble boy. She always answered with a soft smile. "I helped. But healing belongs to everyone now." The new council operated from the low tower once used for trade petitions. No longer was judgment handed down from on high. Kale stood before them now, not as a rebel or a fugitive, but as a witness. "We have proof of more," he said, projecting a list. "Other exiles. Other trials erased." Counselor Seelan, a former court scribe turned advocate, leaned forward. "You want justice for them all. I want the truth recorded. I want reparations. Names restored. Graves marked. Stories told. And Jacek? He stands trial tomorrow. Publicly." That evening, Kale found Tylo sitting on the garden steps, repairing an old drone. "Think they'll actually do it?" Tylo asked. "Hold a real trial?" Kale nodded. "Yes. Because the people are watching now." "And us?" Kale shrugged. "We watch with them." Jacek's trial was held in the open plaza, where thousands gathered. His crimes were read aloud: tampering, profiteering, perjury, conspiracy. He was allowed to speak. He blamed pressure. The system. Tradition. Naila stood and asked a single question. Would you still have exiled me if I had been rich? He had no answer. He was sentenced to exile, not to Terek, but to the same public labor projects he once ordered others to. It was not revenge. It was accountability. And it was just. The weeks turned to months. Former exiles returned. Many broken, but welcomed. Kale helped build a memorial. Names carved into stone. Real names. Not numbers. Naila planted a vine wall around it. Wild mint, fever root, blossom vine. People wept when they passed it. One afternoon, Tylo brought news. The frontier colony of Valix is asking for help. They've got sickness and no medical lead. Kale looked at Naila. She nodded. We'll go, he said. Both of you? All three, Naila replied. We build something new. They traveled by trade runner, landing in the dry valleys of Valix. The sick were housed in canvas wards. The local healers were desperate. Naila set to work. The garden followed them, a small patch of soil they carried from Ventra, planted again on Valix. Soon, people gathered not just for medicine, but for stories. About exile. About justice. About truth. 2 years passed. A small school opened beside the new garden. Kale taught history. Tylo repaired tech. Naila taught healing in silence, when to speak, and when to listen. They never sought fame. But the children learned their names by heart. Not because they led a war. But because they stayed. One evening, under twin moons, Kale and Tylo walked the hill above the garden. Do you miss it? Tylo asked. The fight? The fire? Kale thought. It's still here. Just quieter. Tylo took his hand. Quiet suits us. A wind passed through the valley. Not the wind of vengeance. Not the silence of shame. But the kind that carries seeds. And everywhere it touched, things grew.